Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Grass, Policy and Technology Manager with OFA, and I'm here with Ashley Sweeney, Special Projects Coordinator for Program Compliance. Welcome to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency's webinar on 2016 Annual Owner Reporting. This webinar will be focusing on what is needed to complete your annual reporting submission to OFA. And today we will cover how to manage users, reviewing errors and warnings, reviewing utility allowances, exporting events, where the import feature is located for XML uploads, and how to manage users on each project. We will start by discussing deadlines for 2016 annual owner reporting, and you can access the PowerPoint on this GoToWebinar with the access bar on the right. It'll be under the handout section. Hopefully, as we are going through the information, a lot of your questions will be answered. If not, we will try and answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. If your questions are not answered during the session or in the follow-up email, you can always contact the DevCo Help Desk for assistance. The 2016 Annual Owner Certification and Tenant data are due on Wednesday, March 1st. And owners should ensure that any project that has changes occurring during 2016 are entered in DevCo Online. So you want to make sure that you're entering all of your changes for tenants into DevCo. And new projects or those in the lease-up phase must submit the annual owner certification and tenant data if one or more residents were income qualified during the 2016 calendar year. Projects funded with Ohio Housing Trust Funds or other gap financing only properties will need to submit tenant data on just the units that qualified for gap financing. Projects in extended use or after the first 15 years of the tax credit compliance are required to report on all rental activity for 2016. This coincides with the other changes to extended use monitoring and reporting. All right, Ashley Sweeney will now present the next session on starting to get into DevCo.
Okay, let's get started. We'll be using one of the test accounts to show DevCo Online. So first we want to go to OFA's homepage, which I'll get out of this PowerPoint. OFA's homepage is www.ohiohome.org. Once you get to the homepage, if you scroll down to the quick link portals and click on the DevCo icon. So this is the DevCo homepage. I want to point out the DevCo login is right here on the right-hand side. And also I want to talk about the DevCo Compliance User Guide. This guide has all of the information we will discuss today. This is an excellent resource to have at your fingertips, so I suggest printing it out for your resource, as a resource anyways. I also want to bring your attention to the DevCo videos page, also on the side. This page contains how-to videos that cover the major areas of DevCo used in reporting. The videos include how to register in DevCo, manually entering a tenant event, managing property users, import events or the XML upload, entering a student update, entering a composition update, entering a transfer event, and then also last year's webinar on annual reporting. If you click the DevCo Online System icon here and enter your username and password, you will be taken to the Programs page of DevCo. Each user in DevCo should have their own profile. If not, just click the New Users link and follow the instructions. If you're having trouble registering in DevCo, please contact the DevCo Help Desk. Once you get to the program page, you will click on Tenant Income Certification / Owner Certification. This will bring you to the Property Listings page. All of the projects you have approved access for should be listed under Properties Assigned to You. When you register for DevCo, you are required to enter each project you need access to. Each project should have the 2016 and 2017 certification year listed. We want to go to the 2016 year. You can always use the funnel here to find your project. Then I'm going to the 2016 year. Once you click on the 2016 year, it brings you to the Property Details page. We will discuss managing users first, which is over here on the left-hand side. When you register for DevCo, you're asked about the permissions you want access to. The property owner, who should always register first in DevCo, gives all the other users in the project their permissions. The project owner has permission to approve or deny access, edit information, finalize the tenant data, and complete the annual certification on a property. The next level is the property manager. They have permission to manage users and edit information. Next is an OC editor. They have permission to edit information on the property. And lastly, the OC viewer only has permissions to view the information on the property. This is included in the handout that you can access from the webinar session. Unless you are a property owner or a manager in DevCo, you will not see the current page I'm at or this Manage Users icon on the Property Details page. So next, the Property Details page that I'm on should have the OFA awards and funding for the property. If your owner entity information or your management company information are incorrect, please contact the DevCo Help Desk so we can update this for you. On the left side, you should see the property name and the building identification numbers are bin under it. Did you see? Go. Click the plus sign to view each unit, which this plus sign was already open, so we'll just click that again. The unit name, make sure that all of your units, and your bins are labeled correctly. So make sure all the bins are labeled and all of your units are here. Click on the unit to bring up the unit information page, which I'll click on Unit 1. The unit name, bedroom size, and square footage has been locked, but if this information is incorrect, please contact the DevCo Help Desk. You are able to edit the AMI percentage and unit identity. If you have market units, make sure you change the unit identity to market on the unit information page, which is here. You click Mark It. Next, we'll be going over utility allowances. And you can access utility allowances on the property details page on the right side of the page at the top. The utility allowances should be reviewed to make sure that they are entered correctly for the reporting year. If you have owner-paid utilities, they need to be marked on the building details page for each building. I can show you that. The building details page is actually here. If you click on a bin, and if you had owner-paid utilities, you would click this button. Since we do not, we will unclick it and go back to our utility allowance page. Okay. Utility allowances that were used anytime in the 2016 year need to be added to the system. You may need to add your 2015 utility allowances if the effective date for your 2016 utility allowances are after January 1st, 2016. Utility allowances need to be entered for each utility or for each type of utility allowance, not by unit or bin. Each type meaning by bedroom size or apartment layout. Examples are saying a garden versus a townhome or your 1-bedroom versus 2 bedrooms. And you can see how we have it marked here under our description. And the description of the utility allowances need to be as detailed as possible. You want to be able to decipher between each type of utility allowance with this description. To add a new utility allowance, click Add New. Make sure you have the correct effective date and utility allowance type. So here we're just going to put in an effective date, 1/1/2016, and the verified date. Our description would be a 1-bedroom. Okay. Okay, so the verified date was added to the utility allowances this year. This was added for projects that have the same utility allowance that is used for over the 365 days. If a verified date is added to each utility allowance that has not changed, there is no need to add a new utility allowance. And if you have owner-paid utility allowances, you can mark it under this section by owner-paid or tenant-paid, but this is not required. So I'm just going to continue going through adding a UA. Make sure that you put in the source, the amount, paid by, and the allowance type. Make sure that the allowance type on the side also matches your allowance type at the top. And they also pay electric. Electric. $7. And after you've added everything, you want to make sure that you click all of the bins that correspond to this utility allowance. If you do not click the bins, then it will not show up on the unit that you need. So I will click all of the bins and then push Save. Okay, next we're going to go through entering tenant data. So I'm going to click on Return to Property Details. So once you have all your utility allowances entered, you can start entering your tenant data. You need to enter tenant data based on when it occurred. Do not enter data by event type. For example, entering all your move-ins, then going back to enter all of your move-outs. If a 2016 resident moved in before January 1st, 2016, and you are manually entering tenant data, their move-in information will need to be entered before you add any event in the 2016 year. For example, a tenant that moved in 2010, you would need to go to the 2010 certification year and enter that unit's move-in information first. Please refer to the tenant income certification, or TIC, for the tenant's move-in from the tenant's moving year to enter the correct data. Make sure the unit is either correctly listed as vacant so you can enter in a move-in. So you can always check if a unit is vacant by clicking on the actual unit number again and see the status is vacant for us to enter in a move-in. Double check that you have all of your 2015 move-outs entered in DevCo also before entering your 2016 new move-ins. Also, before entering any other event type, it should be a move-in event entered or the last event entered from the current household. If you do see information, it will be grayed out. So like in this example, we see that the last event is entered from last year, so we see the grayed out information from our tenant. Make sure that the last event's information is correct before you try adding a new event. Once you have entered the move-in event for a tenant, you're able to add their updated events for 2016. Make sure you add all events for the property. These could be move-ins, move-outs, recertifications, transfers, student updates, composition updates, and/or rent updates. If the unit has home or Ohio Housing Trust funds, you will need to do a recertification for the unit. So I'm just going to add in a date in 2016. Click recertification. It doesn't matter if the 2016 year is the year for the full third-party recertification or the self-certification. You need to make sure you do a recert if you have any home or trust funds. When you do a recertification in DevCo, you are allowed to change everything but the household income at move-in, which you see that is actually grayed out here. Unless there was a rent update or composition update on a different day in the 2016 year, you can make all of the changes during the recertification event. I also want to point out that anytime you are printing a TIC for a tenant to sign, you need to make sure you're entering in the income for your tenant. You are only able to add income under non-asset income and asset income now in DevCo. And we've added the actual verbiage here as well. You are not able to add it under the current income anymore, as you see that this is grayed out. Once you add in the non-asset income and asset income, you would click on the Calculate Total Household Income and Member Income, which will automatically populate your current income here and your total household income at the top. If your property is 100% tax credit, meaning you have no market units, you need to do a student update for your units. So I'm just going to delete this event. or just here's the student update. Properties that are in extended use are not required to complete annual student updates. However, you may choose to do so if you are planning to apply for OFA funding in the future. If there has been a rent update since your tenant's move-in year, you need to do a rent update here. If a household member other than the head of household has moved out, moved in, or is expecting a child, you need to do a composition update. If your tenant moved from one unit to another in the same property, you will need to do a transfer event. DEFCO gives unit options to transfer your tenant into once you pick this event type. So you need to pick one of the buildings and then also a unit that's open or vacant. You want to make sure that the unit you are trying to transfer into is vacant before you do this event. And if not, that particular unit will not appear as an option. So we're going to delete this transfer out event. The last type of event is a move out. If you had a tenant that lived in a unit in 2016 but also moved out during the year, you need to record this in DEFCO. Make sure their move-in event is entered in DEFCO before you enter their move-out event. If you had a tenant move in the same unit after this, you will need to add them as well. I want to reiterate that we are concerned with all events that happened during the 2016 year. If you try to enter in all of your move-ins, then all of your move-outs, you will create errors in your unit status, which again, the unit status could be found on the unit information page here. Events should be entered in chronological order to ensure that information is stored properly. We recommend adding events unit by unit. So I'm going to return to the property details page. And from here, on the right side, you can go to the Export Events feature. If you would like to view your progress on entering your tenant events, you can find it here. This will only show the events entered for the reporting year you were in. This will give you an overview of all of the data that is entered into each unit. As you can see, if you scroll over, you can see all of the data entered. To convert this chart into an Excel spreadsheet, click Export Events here. And you can open this spreadsheet from here, which I'm not going to do, but if you need to, you can use this feature to check if you've entered all of your events for the year. If you have compliance software and are planning to upload your XML file into DEFCO, you can do this here, which is the Export Events. We will not be demonstrating the XML upload process today, but we will be going through the steps using our compliance user guide, which I will go to now. Okay, I'm going to go down to the portal again, to the DEFCO portal, and then click on the DEFCO Compliance User Guide. You can see that the XML Upload or the import function is section 8 of the Compliance User Guide. Okay. Make sure your XML file has the tenant data for the entire 2016 year. This is imperative since each time you do an upload for a property, it wipes out any previous tenant data in the reporting year. Before generating the XML file, remember to make sure all events for the reporting year are set to a view mode instead of the edit mode, so that the events, because if you do, the events will likely not be included on your XML file. DevCo recognizes move-ins, move-outs, recertifications, transfer-ins, and transfer-outs. Student updates, composition updates, rent updates are listed as interim recertifications or IRs in most compliance softwares. DevCo recognizes these events as adjustments, or A. We will discuss adjustments a little later. Once you have checked your tenant data, import the XML file. You will click on Import Events and then select the file you want to upload. This shows the import event function here, and then uploading it here. You will likely have a few errors initially. If so, please refer to the list of common errors during the upload process in the Compliance User Guide, which this page talks about all of our errors and how to fix them. And there's a list of errors here that you can contact the DevCo Help Desk if you've received them. One error that's not mentioned is the transfer out date and the transfer in dates being different. DevCo wants these dates to match. This can be corrected by changing the transfer out or your transfer in date so that they are the same. Most errors can be corrected in the XML file by using the XML notepad from 2017 or 2007. And the Compliance User Guide has a link to the notepad here if you'd like to download that onto your computer. This notepad is available for free on the Microsoft website. If you are unable to correct the errors, please contact the DevCo Help Desk for assistance. If the upload is successful, you will have to select the utility allowances for each unit. I'm going to bypass all the errors again. And this is the page you would get to if you're able to successfully upload it. If you have more than 100 units at your properties, please bypass the selecting your utility allowances on this page because it times out. Scroll to the bottom of the page and just push Save. Once completed, you should receive a message stating successfully saved XML data. Just here. And click Done to complete the process. If you bypass the utility allowances section, go into each unit and select the correct utility allowance for each event. Also, if you had adjustments in your XML file, these events were saved as composition updates in DevCo. You will need to change these events to the correct event type. It just shows you here. So you can either change these event types to rent update, student update, or composition update. The last page of the compliance guide explains this in detail, which I'm on now. Please make sure you go to Export Events to make sure your XML upload was successful and that all your tenant data was uploaded. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, please contact the DevCo Help Desk. Now Rachel will be presenting the next session about our property errors.
Okay, so we're going to go back over to DevCo and to the property details page again. And I don't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning, but you can submit your questions that you have throughout the session and we'll be answering them at the end. The questions feature should be in your menu choices for the GoToWebinar. So at the top of the property details page, you'll see an alert message for any issues that you have with your tenant data. And currently it looks like we only have one on our Salmon Chase property. And the severity listed for an issue will either say warning or error. If the severity is a warning, you'll be able to finalize your tenant data with the issue listed. If the severity is an error, you have to correct the issue before you can finalize your tenant data. Both types of issues should be reviewed to see if they can be resolved. And if the tenant data is correct, you do not need to correct anything for the warning. If you have an error and need help correcting the tenant data, please contact the DevCo Help Desk. And I will go back to the guide to show more examples of some of the errors that you can receive, but we'll look at this one first directly in DevCo. It's saying that the utility allowance was required, and with each of these you can click on the event on the right side. So we can see again that at the top of the page that it's telling us the utility allowance is required. And if the utility allowances were set up correct, there should be a utility allowance listed in this drop-down to choose from. So with it missing, like it is now, you would need to check that your utility allowances are entered into DevCo correctly. And that if you're still having issues with all your utility allowances showing up, then you can contact the DevCo Help Desk. But it's important to remember that you have them listed for each bedroom size. So I'll switch over to the guide again. And I'm going to go into the tenant income certification section, which covers manually entering tenant events. And bear with me while I scroll to the correct page. So this table here shows the most common errors that happen in DevCo, and we've actually worked on reducing some of the errors, and I'll get into that in a little bit. If you see any of these errors in DevCo or the warnings, you should be reviewing them. Some of the errors, like the rental assistance amount being required, rental assistance source is required, these are all types of errors that will happen while you're entering information, and it won't actually let you save an event until those are fixed. Whereas some of the other errors are ones that you'll get when you're trying to finalize tenant data. So after you have reviewed the tenant events and resolved your errors and reviewed the utility allowances, it is now time to begin the finalizing year process. So I'm going to go back to the property details page again. And if everything is in order, this is a fairly simple process. And we'll select Finalize Year. and then click Start Finalization. And then we'll follow the prompts. So again, we have our one warning listed. This is something that you should be correcting for the utility allowances. If you receive this type of warning with the utility allowances, this is one that is likely to show up in one of the compliance letters that you're receiving from your analyst if you're not listing all of your utility allowances on your units. But for now, we're going to click Proceed to Finalize. And like I mentioned before, that if you still had an error listed, it must be resolved before completing the finalized year process. We didn't have any errors, so that's why we could move forward. And if you get stuck with an error message, you can contact the DevCo Help Desk. And now that we've started the finalization process, this will switch the property to a property review status. Which means at this point you can no longer edit any of the events and are just confirming that everything is in the system that should be. So if you need to go back and edit something still, you'll have to contact the DevCo Help Desk and get it switched out of the property review status back to active. And so I clicked the Finalize Year. And this is the receipt that you'll receive with it. So the errors that we removed from the system for 2016 are allowable rent exceeded, the income exceeds county AMI income schedule, income exceeds 140% rule, total household income is 0, tenant rent portion is 0, and rental assistance portion is 0. That is all one warning all in itself. Household income at move-in is required, and all members must have an income entered. And all errors and warnings pertaining to the rent and income have been removed from transfer out and move out events. And most of these errors were removed because there was issues with how the information was stored in DevCo and what was available as options for you to correct things in the online system. A lot of these errors came up when it was an XML file, and so there was limitations on what was in the XML file and what was in DevCo. So these are all errors that you shouldn't see in your compliance letters. And that's why the list of errors for when you're finalizing is much smaller than it has been in the previous year. So now that we have our receipt, you could print it at this point. And you also can go back to return to the property details if you had additional things to work on. And this is where you'll see the receipt button, which takes the place of the finalize year. And it is a good idea to print the receipt as well as save and export of the events for your records. In addition to the receipt being available for the property, you will now have a status of finalized for the reporting year. And for the next section, I'm going to switch to a different property. And that'll also give me an opportunity to go over the different statuses that are on properties. So we're going to click to return to property listing. And here you can see the status listed on each property for the 2016-2017 year. And clearly some of them are already marked finalized, and many are still marked active. Active is a property that is open for the certification year. Property review, the property is in the finalization process, and there is extremely limited editing. Finalized, the property has been finalized for OFA review, and editing is no longer possible for tenant events in the reporting year. And monitoring, OFA is reviewing the property before the AOR review is completed. Resolution is a similar status where OFA is reviewing the AORs. And completed, the finalization of the property has been approved by OFA, and the property has been closed for that certification year. So that at that point you should have received your OK letter saying that you didn't have any issues, or you submitted all your corrected findings and everything that needed to be corrected was corrected. So I'm going to go to our Tiffin Senior Test property, which is also Salmon Chase 1. We're going to go over the second part of the annual owner reporting submission, and that's the annual owner certification, or as it's called in Dev Code, annual certification. To access this, you need to go to the property details page, which we're on now, and click the annual certification button on the right. The first page of this is the property's general information, and this is your opportunity to list any changes or updates that you have. And each section of this is going to ask if the information is up to date or not. So you have your project information, which shouldn't really have changes there. It's going to confirm that the units are correct. And if there's any management updates, we'll say that the information for this is not up to date. This gives you an opportunity for this example. It does not list a management contact or an on-site manager. If you're listing a contact here, you would want to include the phone number and email as well for that person. And also with this example, the owner contact is missing, so I've selected no for that as well. And once you've reviewed the page, you can click Save. That gives you an opportunity to come back to the page at any point. And if you're finished with the page, click Next. This will take you to the second of 3 screens. You're going to first select your certification types. There's gap financing, tax credit, and extended use. If you have tax credits and gap financing, you'll want to select both of them. And to do this, you can click on gap financing, and then also using the keyboard, press Control and also select tax credit while you click. That'll highlight both of them, and then you can click Load. And this works the same way if you had gap financing and extended use. You'll want to make sure to select both of them at the same time. If your property is in extended use, you do not need to complete the tax credit questions. And for this, tax credit refers to a property that is in its first 15 years of funding. So we're going to go through the questions here. I'm not going to go into too much detail on each specific question, but there is a couple that I will cover because we have at least one new question this year. And make sure to pay attention to any notes that are on the question. They provide more explanation on what the intent of the question is. And this first one is specifically asking if you have any changes to the entities managing or owning the property that's not about contacts at the property or your personnel. So I want no for that. This next question is a new question. It's asking if the property is third-party managed or managed by a company that is not part of the ownership interest. And then it has a note that you should be completing the Ohio broker's license information in DevCo, and it explains where in DevCo that's at. It's on the organization information screen. So we'll mark yes for that. And as you can see here, depending on what answer that you give, you'll have to provide additional information with one of the explanation boxes. And with the question that I have here, the applicable fraction, I noted that there was a change. For this example, I'll say that there is now a manager's unit. And it's worth noting here that because I selected both the gap financing and tax credit, that the questions here are a combination of ones that are for specifically the tax credit program, as well as ones that are specifically just for gap financing. And then some of the first questions about changes in ownership, that sort of thing, are general questions that are on all properties. And as you can see here with question 16, I'm starting to get into some of the ones that are specific to gap financing with a question about home rent. With some of these questions, if you didn't know the answer immediately, this is a good time that you would use the save feature that's on the page. It'll store all the answers that you've had up until that point. But we're going to click next now that we have all the questions filled in. And this brings us to the Submit Annual Certification page. This serves as an electronic signature, and it should be, as it states here, done by somebody that has the signatory authority for the entity, the ownership entity. And the information list on this page is just reminding you of all of the additional parts of the annual certification, that you should be submitting your tenant events as well, and making sure that all your utility allowances are entered into DevCo. So at this point, we'll click Submit. And with how I answered the questions, it's reminding me that I need to include the broker's license information for third-party management. Depending on how the questions are answered and what things you have going on at your property, you could see additional alerts here where you'd have to provide more information to OFA. And if it's requesting additional documentation, for example, if you had fair housing findings, you would want to provide that to your analyst. And once you're on this page and you've submitted, you'll see the same alert at the bottom in red, and you can also print the page. You now have a button at the bottom to print. This brings you to a summary of everything that was just completed, and it lists out all the questions with the answers and any explanations that were provided. And just like with the tenant income certifications, you can use the export feature at the top. It looks like a floppy disk to create a PDF and print when you have it open as a PDF, or you can just save the PDF file to your computer. So that brings us to the end of the presentation, and actually I'll show you one more thing with the annual certification. Anytime that you return to an annual certification after it's submitted, you'll have a red alert message like you see here with the submission date and the time that it was submitted. That's letting you know that it's already been submitted to OFA and you can't make any changes unless you contact the DevCo help desk and ask for the certification to be opened back up. So that's the end of the presentation, and we'll take any of the questions that you have, and it already looks like we have several submitted. Let's see. One of the first ones that we have here is, if you have a new property and the BIN numbers are not listed, do I send an email to the DevCo help desk? Yes. If you do not have your bins or your units in DevCo, you should email the DevCo help desk. We will make sure that you're in contact with the correct PP&D staff. They'll end up working with you on making sure that the bins and units are set up correctly so that they're matching how the 8609s are going to be set up. We have a great question about income and rent percentages. The question asks if you have 40% on your units, what is the corresponding percentage in DevCo? Anytime you have a percentage that's not listed in DevCo, you should select the next highest percentage that is listed.
Also, make sure you note the actual percentage for that unit in the notes section of the event, just so you can have that information for your records. So Rachel's going into...
So as an example here, you can see that 40% is not one of the options. The only options in DevCo are 30, 35, 50, 60, and 80. And then high home and high low apply to only home and trust. But you also have the notes box here, which is where you could identify that it was a 40% or a 47%. We have a question specific to XML, and it's asking if it's possible to combine two XML documents together. It is possible. You would want to use the XML Notepad 2007 that Ashley talked about. But if you're really struggling with it, you can contact the DevCo help desk and we can assist you through the process of combining two files together.
The next question is a question that we get often about showing all the reporting years in DevCo. And Rachel's going back through here now. Anytime you're trying to get to an older reporting year, you need to click this funnel next to property name and type in your property's name or part of it so it can be filtered out. And then click the Show All Reporting Years button.
And you can see here now that this Show All Reporting Years checkbox is no longer grayed out.
And this will bring up any older years that you need. And if you don't see this here, there's actually a link on our DevCo homepage that shows like older alerts and announcements that we have.
So it's our DevCo alerts and announcements page, and this covers our release updates. And then we also have a quick guide that covers the showing all reporting years. It's a one-page document that goes through the screenshot of the steps that we just did.
Someone had a question about entering in your utility allowances during the XML process. And they were asking if you can actually do it by bin or by building. The answer is no. You actually have to enter those on the page that we give. But if you have over 100 units, you do have to go into each unit and select the utility allowances.
It looks like Kelly Burgee has a question that's specific to XML with a certain event type and issues with the limit. Just email the DevCo help desk with that, and we'll get back to you on that because it depends on the property what steps you'll need to fix that.
If you're having issues with the actual unit status, like if it's saying it's occupied and the unit is actually vacant, please contact the DevCo help desk. For whatever reason, DevCo, when we first started reporting a few years ago, it started out as most of the units being occupied instead of vacant, which can possibly be causing some issues. So just contact the DevCo help desk.
We are going to be posting a recorded copy of this webinar in addition to the question and answer session that was at the first webinar. It hopefully should be up tomorrow, or it will be up later in the week. And we have a few more questions related to utility allowances and XML upload. When you're doing the XML, well, before you do the XML upload, you want to make sure you have all your utility allowances for that reporting year listed in the system. And then when you do the XML upload, if your property is smaller, you can identify the utility allowance as you go through each unit. If it's larger, you'll want to click Save at that point and keep going through the XML upload process, and then return to each unit after it's been saved and identify the utility allowance by household and unit.
And yes, it will have to be, you do have to enter the utility allowance on each event on each unit. So if you have multiple events in a unit, you do have to go to each event. Someone had a question about the PowerPoint. We can also send the PowerPoint out to anyone who registered for this webinar.
We have a question related to if the annual operating survey is required, and it is only required for properties that meet certain conditions. We should have an updated requirements list for the annual owner reporting. So I went to the compliance page that's on the DevCo homepage area. It covers the annual owner reporting. That's where you'll find the annual operating survey if you need to complete it. But I'll double check and make sure that I have correct which years require the annual operating survey.
Someone asked if your rents are lower in 2017, like if you're adding your UAs and that would lower your rent. You do need to do rent updates. That would happen if there's any changes to your tenant rent. So if the UAs have gone up or down. There was another question about if you can edit information in previous years. You can edit information in previous years, again, by going to the auto reporting years. Just make sure that you're entering events in chronological order. So if you've already added any information for the 2016 or 2017 year, and you're trying to enter in an event from that same unit, you will have to delete that information first before you can enter in the historic information.
All right. If you still have questions, you can contact the DevCo Help Desk or submit a question to the DevCo Help email. We've already went a little over for our time, so I hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you.